Now, if you break away from that and now you start creating a buffer and you don't spend all of your money, the next problem is we save our money. Because for me, the only financial education that I was given was save your money. Because if you're not spending it, now you are building up a big bank account. And if you have a big bank account, you'll be wealthy. But the reality is you will never be able to become wealthy through your savings. Your savings will never make you wealthy. And if you don't believe me, I'll give you just a mathematical term. Your savings right now are growing by essentially nothing, but let's just say 1%. And I'm being very, very generous here. If your savings grow by 1%, and inflation is higher than 1%. And we can see now inflation is extremely high, but even before the 2020 pandemic, inflation was still higher than 1%. We were 2 or 3%. Inflation means that the value of your savings are dropping. So if inflation is higher than your savings, that means that your savings are losing value each and every day. Every day that you save your money in the bank, you are slowly becoming poorer each and every day. And most of us never see it happen. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't save any money. This just means you have to understand how to save your money strategically, because wealthy people do not want to save all their money. They want to save their money for an emergency. They save their money for an investment, or they save their money for a big purchase. If it doesn't fall into one of those three things, you don't want to save your money, because now you're saving money. Your savings are just making you poorer each and every day. This brings me to then the second aspect, which is blindly following and trusting the system. And this one was the most difficult one for me, because growing up, most of us, myself included, are always told that if you want to become successful, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder. For me, it was go to school, get good grades, get into medical school, become a doctor. I know you've heard similar stories before.
Yeah.
That was all that I was told. Since I was like a little baby, my parents would tell everybody, Jaspreet is going to become a doctor. He's going to go out and do medicine, this and that. And that's what I was always told. And I was not really against it, because I wanted to be successful. I saw how hard my parents worked. Since I was a kid, I always wanted to give back. And I always assumed that, okay, if I got good grades, I'll get into a good medical school. And if I do good in medical school, I'll be able to get a good job as a doctor. And if I get a good job as a doctor, I'll be able to make more money. I thought it was all just linearly correlated. Yeah. Your grades, your income, your grades, your success. That was one of the reasons why growing up, anything that was not medical or academic related, it was completely discouraged. And sometimes I think it's very difficult for someone to understand what does it mean that, like, you know, your parents really wanted you to be a doctor, because it wasn't like an option. Like, this was the only option. And I think the best example that I can give of that was when I was in 8th grade. I was like, 12 years old. My parents got me a tutor, not for the English class that I was on the verge of failing, not for the other stuff that I was studying for in 8th grade, but for the medical college admission test. The test you take in college to get into medical school, my parents got me a tutor for when I was in 12th grade. We didn't spend money on a lot of things. The only thing that parents were willing to spend money on were things related to academics to get me into medical school. And so here I am in 12th grade. I have an MCAT tutor coming to my house, and he's like, wait, this is the kid that I'm teaching about medical school to get him into medical school. And like, that's how strict it was in my house. So I was checking all the boxes. I was doing good in school. I was studying hard. I was getting good grades. But then along the way, I realized that something wasn't adding up. When I was in high school, I was working at Indian weddings. I was playing a drum called the dole. And I got to meet a lot of the local Indian DJs that work at Indian weddings. And we became friends. And they would say, you have a lot of friends in high school. How about we start hosting teen parties in high school? Now, I couldn't tell my parents this, because again, anything that's not, medicine related, going to get me into medical school, I can't tell them. So I would do this all on the side. Even going to work at weddings, I had to kind of keep it all secret. And I was like, okay, let's do it. It was fun for me. So I was 16 years old and I started hosting these teen parties at a local restaurant that just opened up, and they wanted some exposure. So they let us do it there for free. And it was fun. But then I was like, I know this is a hobby. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to become a doctor, and this is all going to become history. Well, I go to college. I'm 17. I don't know what to expect because my parents didn't go to university here. And I think that everybody goes to college. They spend their Friday nights in the chemistry lab. They all want to become this big thing, and they want to spend all their time studying in college. And I get there and everybody is partying, drinking, blowing money they don't have on all this stuff. Like, I don't party, I don't drink, I never drank, I didn't smoke. So for me, it was like a big shock. And I was like, this is weird. Like, this is not what I expected, but I still need something to do on Friday nights. So that entrepreneur side of my brain kicked in again. It was like, oh, let's bring this party business back to college, because that's all I knew. So I was like, oh, okay. So I'm 17. I start knocking on the doors of all the clubs, venues, bars, restaurants, asking them if I can host party here. And again, I'm not a party person. I don't drink. I don't smoke. But this was the only hustle that I knew. And, I just didn't know much else. So eventually I found a club that would work with me, and they didn't want to charge me anything. They will let me work on essentially a commission basis, that they'll take a percentage of the revenue that I bring in. And I said, okay, it doesn't cost me any money because I didn't have a lot of money. I started hosting these parties, but I still knew that this was just a hobby, something I'm doing because I was bored on weekends. Then I started studying to go into medical school. And this is where things really shifted, because I had some cash saved up in the bank. And now this is like the bottom of the 2008 crash, because I was in high school when the 2008 crash happened. Around 2012 was when I was studying for the MCAT. So real estate prices are at rock bottom and the markets are still really shaky. And I'm starting to study for the MCAT, and I am bored out of my mind trying to study for this because I just wasn't very passionate about it. And so during my breaks, I would read business books, and I would go on the Yahoo Finance, and I would study what's going on in the markets just for fun. And I kept hearing about how real estate is at rock bottom on the news. And the business books that I read always said that wealthy people invested in real estate. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know any real estate investors. I didn't know what real estate investing was. I didn't have investor people in my family, so I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, well, if wealthy people invest in real estate, maybe I should invest in real estate. So I brought up the idea to my dad. I was like, Dad, I want to invest in real estate. He's like, shut up. You're stupid. Go study and become a doctor. You can worry about all this other stuff after you become a doctor. And I was like, okay. Now, I just want to say, I love my dad to death. My parents, this was just all they knew. They didn't have that financial education. But in the back of my mind, I'm always like, okay, what can I do? Maybe I don't got to tell my parents. I'll just do something else. I had a little bit of cash saved up in the bank from the party business that I was running. So I started looking at rental properties to buy. And I found this small condo on sale for $8,400. That was the price of the condo.
That's wow.
And that same condo a few years prior had sold for $150,000.